Saludos mi gente, I am Erika Hernandez and this is the Polymath Latina podcast. Join me every week in real conversation with women from all walks of life who are making a true impact in their communities. We will dive into different topics that range from culture to religion, health, politics, and business. Whether it's a one-on-one conversation with my guest or a table discussion open for debate, one thing is for sure, no topic is left off the table. Today, we are talking to Diana Lee Santamaria. She is an early childhood educator and award-winning author of DLee's World, which is Diana's bilingual children's book series that touches on preschool objectives to help increase early literacy, showcase diversity, and aid learning through fun. Welcome. How are you?
I'm great.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so fun fact, because I love to share how I know my guest, right? So people don't think that I'm just pulling them from the sky, right? So fun fact is, we met on Clubhouse, right? So I decided to go on Clubhouse. Now, mind you, I've been on Clubhouse since the very, very beginning.
Okay.
And I have joined a lot of rooms. I've been brought up on stage many times. I've even been a moderator. And even though I have my own club on Clubhouse, I've never done a room by myself. Mm-hmm. I've never taken that initiative, right? So when I was looking for guests for this podcast, I was like, you know what? Let me just go on Clubhouse. You know, God knows what'll happen. So I get on Clubhouse, I open my room. I remember the title is New Jersey, New York, Women of Color casting guests for podcasts.
I didn't even see all that, by the way, but go ahead. I'm just saying.
Thanks. So I'm there in the room, and I'm literally there by myself in my room. Nobody had entered my room. I was there for like maybe 10, 12, 15 minutes. And all of a sudden, like, I see a little, like, your profile, like that you're in your room, and I'm like, oh my God, like somebody's in my room, right? And I'm like, hello, hi, how are you, Diana? My name is Erika, and I'm like blabbering on about why I started this room, but you had just gotten on Clubhouse, and you had no idea.
I had no idea what I was doing. So it was funny because I was actually putting my son down for a nap, and he was just about to fall asleep, and someone had. Well, actually, months prior, someone told me about Clubhouse, one of my friends.
Right.
So I joined, but I didn't look into it more than that. I just joined up, signed up, and then added stuff to my profile.
Right.
That was the extent of my knowledge of how to work this. I didn't know anything about it. And then I'm putting my son to sleep, and all of a sudden, right before you popped up, a friend of mine had sent me a Clubhouse, I guess there was a group going on, a conversation happening. So she sent me an invite. So I jumped on and I was just listening, right? And that was the first time I ever did that. And I listened for a little bit, but I was putting him to sleep, so I logged off. And then all of a sudden, my phone kind of chimed, and it said something about Clubhouse. So I just clicked it, and then automatically I'm in your room. And I was like, oh no, what did I do? Because you started talking to me. I was like, I don't even know how to respond.
Yeah, I had invited you to come up to be on the stage
I got so
to
nervous.
talk.
I was like, wait, I don't understand.
And I'm like, you're talking to this woman, and she's not even accepting my invitation to come on stage.
I didn't know what I was doing.
And she's not even answering me. So finally, you figured it out. I'm like, you have to press the unmute button, you know?
Yeah, well, the thing was, I guess in my head, I was like, do I just exit out? I was like, should I exit out? Because I didn't.
Let me tell you something. This would have played all very differently if you would have exited out of that.
No, definitely.
Room.
But it's funny how things work out, because it was just, like I said, it was a coincidence. I had no idea what I was doing, and all of a sudden I clicked in. So I was nervous because you started talking to me. I was like, I don't even know what to press. Should I just come out of it? I don't understand. And then I was actually really grateful that we had that conversation. I think sometimes the universe works like that.
Right.
You know?
Right. But you are here to talk about your books, your book series, your children's series, DLee's World.
Right.
Can you share with us how you got started, and who is this character, DLee's? How was she born?
So I actually got started, I would say, about 2014. Mm-hmm. I was an educator in the classroom. I had my teaching certification for maybe a few years. I was teaching in East Orange a little bit prior, and then I started working in Newark. And I was reading to the students every day as part of the curriculum, right? And I was really analyzing a lot of the books that the kids liked and some of the books that they didn't like. And I started really focusing on that. Like, okay, so they really like this book because it had a rhyme. And why do they like rhymes? Because it's like a song, and songs are memorable, right? So I started really like analyzing a lot of those elements in the stories. And then I also started analyzing other elements, like the ones that they didn't like, oh, why didn't they like this story? Well, it's not very like colorful. And there's no vibrance here, and the characters, like, they're so, you know, I can tell that this is what they're looking for, right? So just like analyzing those little things, and then one day I went home and I was like, oh, maybe I can write a story. Because I always loved the arts growing up. Like, it was always fuel to my soul, you know? So I went home and I wrote a story, and I pretty much just slept on it. And, you know, maybe like, I think months had passed by, and I was like, now I was in grad school for early childhood. I was getting my master's degree, and one of my friends and I, we were studying for finals, and then we were taking a break, and we were just talking about life. And I told her, like, I think I want to, you know, write books. And then she's like, really, why? And then I was like, well, I wrote something. She's like, well, then read it to me. And I was like, okay. So I read it to her, and she's like, oh my God, Di, you should really continue. And I'm like, serious? Like,
well, now, did you write a children's book, or it was just something that you put together?
It was DLee.
Okay,
it was a DLee story. It was called DLee Shapely Imagination, which is the book that I just put out in November.
Okay.
So it wasn't the first book I put out, because I ended up modifying it like a bunch of times, because it didn't feel right, you know? And I feel like with art, it has to feel right. So, yeah, so she told me that I should continue, and it sparked something in me. And like that night, I had gone home, and like stories started to flood from me. So once I created some of the stories, I already knew, I was kind of like, I want DLee to be like me, because a lot of the stories are reflective of experiences in my own personal childhood, but also my career as an educator. So I've taken all of the elements of me and put it in these stories for early childhood. So because of that, you know, I was like, you know, DLee should be me. And I looked, you know, I had like a bigger face growing up. I was a little heavier, had the really, really big glasses, and I got made fun of a lot. And for that reason, I was like, you know, I'm gonna make that a main character. Yeah, why not? Yes. You know, I can do this. And I don't see many diverse characters in children's books. And at that time, like even less. Like now, you're starting to see it more. But before in 2014, like you weren't really seeing that. So I was like, I'm gonna bring that, you know, little Latina girl to the forefront.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it, especially that we need so much more of it, right? Right? So I know you're self-published. Was that always your plan?
No. So I didn't even know what my plan was, to be honest. I was just like,
you're like, I have a great story,
right,
but now
I'm just kind of winging it. No.
Right.
No, and then I started researching, and I'm like, oh my goodness, okay, so there's a lot that, you know, goes into it. And I knew that, but I wasn't fully knowledgeable in it. So I had to do a lot of research. So looking into it, I found out I need to have like a literary agent, because most publishing companies, like larger publishing companies, they won't take like unsolicited queries.
Right.
So you need to have a literary agent in order to have your stuff looked at. But in order to get a literary agent, you need to send them a query, and you have to get them to look at your stuff to begin with. And to do that sometimes is really difficult. And of course, like I have nobody in my family that has any connections at this point. And and I'm like, I know nobody. I don't know what to do. So then I have a cousin that her and I were chatting about it, and she was like, why don't you try self-publishing? And I was like, really? I never thought of that. So then I looked into it, and then I found like an outlet that was user-friendly, and I used it. And that's kind of how it all started. And of course, like before I actually like submitted my work, I was like super scared. And I actually wasn't the one that pushed the button. My cousin pushed it to like submit everything, because I had everything already all set up. You know, it took, you know, a long time. Like I had things edited, you know, it was like a whole process, making everything just right. And I was super scared to just submit, but my cousin pressed send or submit.
So you wrote the stories. How about the illustrations?
So the illustrations I do not do, but DLee, the character, was created by myself and my sister because it was based on my own image as a child. So we shot that over to a friend of my sister-in-law's who lives in the Philippines. So it's kind of crazy how life is though, right? Because I mentioned to my sister-in-law that I wanted to do this whole series, and I wanted it to be a learning series for children to help them learn at an earlier age, since I actually struggled with reading later on in life. So in order to encourage that early literacy, I mentioned this to her, and then she was like, oh, well, I have a friend from, the Philippines that can do that for you. And I said, really? She's like, yeah, why don't you have like a video chat with him? So we did. We had one video chat, and then I was like, all right, we're doing this. And that's how it all started.
That's great. And and it sucks because I am like so glad that there are so many avenues now for people to not accept a no. Mm-hmm. Right? Because if you would have had a literacy agent, if you would have had a book agent, if you would have had whatever it is that you needed to get published through a traditional publishing house, mm-hmm. The numbers show that minorities, there's only so much space for minority authors. Right. You understand? So even if you would have had all the connections and life would have been differently, what are still those chances of that possibly happening? So I love advancement. I love technology. I love the opportunities that we have right now, mm-hmm. that we can go out and say, okay, you don't want my book, or you don't want to publish my book, or you don't think I'm good enough, I'm going this route, right? Or I don't want to do the work, because there's people that are like that. They're like, I don't want to do the research. I don't want to get a literacy. Like, I just want to get it done, right? So thank God for those, resources and tools that we have, that we can just pretty much wake up one day and say, I'm going to
do this. I feel like we're super fortunate because, we can pave our own path.
Right.
And that was something like, I don't know anybody who does this. I don't know any authors, but you know what? I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
For the first time, I built up that confidence to just go with it.
Yeah. So. And it's funny because we were talking about confidence right before we started. And I always tell people, like, if you've lost your confidence, I'm in that place right now, where I think where many of us are in a sense where with a pandemic, being locked down, mm-hmm. This trying to adapt to this new normal, having to be real, having the time to have to look at ourselves in the mirror and be real, reflective, and, and things like that, I feel like sometimes when we need that bit of confidence is just going back to those moments where we felt confident. Yeah. Right? And it's like for you, it was like I was confident to go out there and publish my book, mm-hmm. regardless of whatever would happen, right? Whatever the outcome was. And I feel like when those moments of like doubt or, that self-confidence is like, hey, like I need you. It's like, remember that. Like, girl, like I'm that woman that published that book. Like where are you?
Pocket, right?
Yeah.
To remind yourself.
Yeah.
I definitely need to continuously do that because I find that sometimes I forget that.
Yeah.
And I forget that,
that you are a badass girl. You badass. no matter what, right? Yeah. So I know that after we finished on Clubhouse and we finished talking because you were with your baby and whatever else, we did have a phone call.
Yeah.
To like get to further know each other and make sure that I wasn't just a crazy weirdo trying to bring you on camera and whatnot. You shared with me that as a child, you grew up with trouble in literacy, mm-hmm. reading and whatnot. And I resonated like right away. And I was like, wow. And I shared it with you, like, me too. Yeah. Like I was that girl in elementary school, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, that would get pulled out of my class to get that special help. Right? And I was also that child who, I want to say because maybe they didn't know better, mm-hmm. Didn't have a parent with the understanding, right, mm-hmm. of the difficulties that can be. And I know that that's something that you and I, kind of talked on and shared on, and we kind of like were like, yeah, me too. Even right now, before we started filming, we're like, yeah, I was the same way. Like my dad used to, like he thought that if I was there for 2 hours, that I would miraculously learn how to read, right? And my mother was like, it's not it's and so we have that similarities. So I want you to share a little bit about that journey, and how does a person like yourself, right? I hate reading, girl. Like. My nonprofit, Latina Maid, Not Maid, has a book club, and I made sure I recruited every book lover there was on the planet that was Latina to host these book clubs every month, because I do not read. I do not. Yeah, I'll do. But even audiobooks, it has to be something that really interests me.
Yeah.
So if it's about women empowerment, if it's about business development, or something like that, yeah. But I'm not one to just be like, oh, the Harry Potter series. Yeah, let's sit down and like, no, that is not gonna happen. Not in an audio or Kindle or hard or, whatever. So how does a person like yourself, because obviously at some point you had to fall in love with reading or just the creation of a character, right? Yeah. So what was that journey of, that girl that was 8, 9 years old, whose father was like, found out she couldn't read, to becoming an educator, right? And then becoming a children's book author.
So I just kind of feel like my story kind of went like this. It wasn't like seamless, but I think that's how life is sometimes, right? You kind of go off, you go left, and then you come back to the right. So anyway, I'll get into it. So basically, when I was about 9, my dad realized that I couldn't read because he was sitting home with me for the first time trying to do homework with me, and I had no idea what I was doing because I couldn't read it, and I wasn't understanding in the classroom, so now I couldn't relay it back to him.
Right.
So he's like, you don't know how to read? And I'm like, in the 3rd grade, and I'm like, oh, I guess not, right? And then he's like, oh, no, you have to learn, because my dad also struggled with reading growing up, and, he came here from Ecuador. And so when he was in the school system, he really had a hard time with like just education in general. So him knowing now that I don't know how to read, his daughter here, and he's like, no, I can't have this because I don't want you to have the same struggles as me. So then from then on, it became every day when he would come home from work, and he was like working a full-time job and then also going to school for his bachelor's degree. My mom was also working, so like they didn't really have a lot of time, right? Because I was like with my grandma or with my aunts. Life. Yeah. So then when he would come home and sleep, and now we have to sit down, and he actually got this book. It's called Why Johnny Can't Read, and he would sit down with me and we would go through the book. But it wasn't the best experience. I think it was a lot of like hits that I would get upside the head, to be honest.
I still have PSD.
Because like I wasn't getting it, I wasn't understanding. We're 2 hours in and I'm like, like I'm overstimulated. Just because you hit a kid over the head doesn't mean they're gonna get it any faster.
Right.
And it was hard. It was definitely hard, but we got through it. I learned how to read. And the positive thing was that from then on, I started to excel. Okay. So from that point on, things started to get easier for me. And it was, so in that sense, it was great, But like that whole time when we were learning, you were like,
there must be a light at the end of this tunnel, right?
Please let me learn. I need to learn how to read.
So being an educator is something that you've always wanted to be, or
No, it's like that's why I was saying I went like all different routes. So like I've always just loved art in general. So I used to love singing and like acting and doing things of that nature. So I originally went for my bachelor's degree in communications, actually, because I thought that I wasn't very outgoing. I was very timid growing up. I was like the shy girl that would like whisper in my cousin's ear to speak for me. So that was me. I wasn't confident at all. I'm growing. Hey. No, but so I actually, and the weird thing is I always liked, like the acting and the singing and all of that. But
well, I think most shy people are. Like, they love the acting and the singing.
They're like a little introverted, but they still have that personality where they can come out.
Yeah, because my sister's not an actress or anything like that, but she's super introverted and she's super shy. But then if you go on Instagram and you see her stories, she's making a damn fool out of herself, and she's okay with that.
She's fine with
so I get it.
Yeah, so I didn't think I was gonna go into education at that time. I was like, I just need to build my confidence a little bit more. I need to get comfortable with the camera. So I started doing speech communications because I didn't know what to do. So I did it because I was like, I can take public relations classes, and that's something of interest to me. At least I'll be like towards a camera, or near one, and like kind of maybe take some public speaking classes so I can build that confidence. So I went from that to getting after I graduated, I got a job in a small communications firms, and I was kind of like doing everything under the sun with them. And then at that time, I was also doing like a small internship, and one of the public relations ladies, she mentioned to me about that she used to teach early childhood. And then I thought about it, like I always used to play being a teacher when I was a kid, like kind of silly, but I used to copy the encyclopedia and we're playing teacher, and I'm just copying and trying to have the neatest handwriting and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, I always loved that stuff, and I've always been a big kid at heart. So I thought about it, and I ended up getting my certification in early childhood education, and then I landed a job really quickly in East Orange, and I worked there for 2 years. But then because I was still so young and I didn't have an education background, it was definitely a difficult experience. It was fun, but it was difficult. And so I took a break for a little bit, and I started acting in the city, and I started taking improv classes and things of that nature, and it was exciting, but it was nerve-wracking, and and I'm like, I don't know if this is fully for me either, right? But I had to do it to see, right? So I did it for a little bit. I did some short films, and then I was like, I don't know. So I went back into education, and I started to really build that passion. So that's when I got inspired with the books. I ended up starting to work in Newark, and I got inspired. The kids were my biggest inspiration, just being around them. They were like fuel, for me. And I'm like, wow, getting all of these ideas. And that's kind of how it just it started.
So in other words, life just came full circle.
Yeah.
Right? Because your books are to help preschoolers and young children learn how to read.
Yeah,
right?
to build that enjoyment of reading, right? To build it early on so that, they don't have to struggle the way I did later on, and then maybe not like books or not be into it. Because to be honest, you're reading your entire life. Yeah. Everything involves reading, right? Yeah. Even if you go to a restaurant, you have to read a menu. Everything involves reading. So, and it's it's shown that it helps later on in life. So getting them to really enjoy it in the beginning stages is super important.
Yeah. But again, full circle.
Yeah, full circle.
The acting, the teaching, everything just came full circle. And I think life is that way. I'm not going to talk about me because this is not about me, but it's like when they say, jack of all trades, master of none. I'm jack of all trades. I've mastered a few. I've pretty much any career except one that requires street walking or a pole. I've pretty much tried, cosmetology, this, that, the third. You know what I mean? Because, as a creative, and I think you might understand, it's very hard to nail down what we want to do for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, and that was the problem I was struggling with. I'm like, I know I like this, but also my parents weren't encouraging that creative side of me. They're like, that's not going to make you money.
Well, yeah.
To be honest, right? So that's why I was like, well, then what do I do? Because that's all I love.
Right.
Right? I was always drawing. I was always singing. I was always wanting to do plays. And, I'm like, well, what do I do now? I always liked to write. Even then, I used to write a lot of poems and create stories. And I used to draw characters, not knowing that one day this was going to be part of my life and something that I love. But it wasn't really encouraged back then because, like I said, they didn't think that it was something that was going to be, profitable for me in the future. Right. So I was just there, stuck on stupid, not knowing what to do.
Right.
I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll do speech communications.
Right. No,
You know?
but look at you now, girl.
Yeah.
Look at you now. 7 books in, guys. 7 books in. But going back to, that struggle with parents and children, because we've been there.
Yeah.
We know what it is to be that child at that kitchen table with a parent who is frustrated, is tired because they've been working all day, doesn't understand. As the educator in you, okay, what are some tips, or one tip, not some, but what is one tip that you can share with these parents that have been in our parents' shoes? You know what I mean? The parent that is dealing with a child who is having trouble reading and writing and doesn't have the patience, right? Because it's frustrating. Because if you don't know, if you didn't go to school to be an educator,
right,
how do you know, right? So what is one tip that you can give those parents that maybe might be going through it right now?
So if you are that parent, right, and you get easily frustrated because you're tired, I would say hire a tutor. You know why? Because they know what to do and how to do it to get your child to learn. And I think that's important. Because, like you said, a lot of parents, they didn't go to school for that. They don't really know that educating a child really takes a lot of patience. And if you don't have it, you're going to discourage your child from wanting to continue to learn. And you don't want to discourage them. You want to encourage them. And in order to do that, maybe you take a step back and just get someone to, that does know, who is knowledgeable, to tutor. I think that might be like a really good tip for parents who are frustrated, right? But if not, then you start them off early. You start them off with language. So
Right.
literacy is all about language, and it's language development. So even with my son, I have a 2-year-old. So what I did when he was in the womb, I was constantly talking to him. And now I'm constantly talking to him. I'm like, oh, look, Papa, this is the tree. And on that tree, there's branches.
Right.
I'm very expressive and constantly helping him to make connections and having those conversations with him. That's really important to start doing early.
Right.
And then from there, it just makes things a lot easier when they go to read, because they have that language, they have that vocabulary. So reading to them is really important. So even putting it as a part of the bedtime schedule, reading to them at night, or reading to them at a specific time in the day, or maybe
Right.
3 times a day, or however many times. If you can only do it once, you only do it once. You could do it
Right.
at bath time. Anytime. You could
Right.
read a menu. You could read anything. But just setting aside that time is really important. And then even building maybe family time to read, every night it doesn't have to be every night, but maybe
Right.
weekly or something, you read together as a family. Or you go to the library together, you pick out books, go to Barnes & Nobles, you check out the new books that are in. Those
Right.
kinds of things, just kind of making it fun. And just remembering, though, children don't learn if you're angry. They're not going to learn when you're you're mad at them,
I think it brings, it's more overwhelming,
Yeah.
right? And it actually shuts, I think, the
It
brain
makes
down.
you shut down, yeah.
It really does.
Yeah, so that's why you have to keep your cool. So in order for you to keep your cool, you have to remember, first of all, they're just kids. They've only been around X amount of years. It's something I always have to tell myself, even with my 2-year-old. He's only been around 2 years.
Girl, give him some slack.
Yeah, cut them some slack. They don't know yet, right? They're just
Yeah.
learning. How were we when we were just learning? So just reminding yourself, and I feel like that's just life, right? You constantly reminding yourself of different things, but especially with children, you have to remind yourself that they're little, and there's no way they're going to get it by you yelling at them. You have to make it fun, and that's another big thing, making it fun, which is another reason why when I started creating my books, I'm like, I want them to be learning books, but I also want them to be fun, vibrant,
Yeah.
bold, and have that brightness to them, because that's a really important. Kids gravitate towards people's energy just the way we do. And if you're not a nice person, they're not coming to you. So if you're a parent and you're overly frustrated, your kid is not going to want to learn with you, bottom line.
Okay. So can you share with us some of the titles of your
Yeah,
7
of
books
course.
before we wrap up, and
Yeah.
you give us a little story time?
All right. So I have 7 books, and one of them is DLee's First Day of School, and I have another
Very
one.
appropriate for now. This is the appropriate time.
And then I have DLee Snow Day.
Also very appropriate for winter.
I have Un Mal Día de DLee, which is DLee's Bad Day, which I also have in English. So all my books are bilingual, by the way.
Amazing.
I have them English and Spanish translation because I think it's important, right? Especially growing up in like a Hispanic home where I wasn't taught Spanish because my dad felt like I needed to be immersed in the English language. And now that I'm out in the real world, I need to know Spanish. And it's like, oh, well, my parents never really taught me. So I was like, you know what? I want to include that in my books because I think it's super important, you know?
Love it.
Especially like, so English-speaking parents, English-speaking children can work with their parents who might not know the language, right? And they can know that their language is equally important and valued. So that was another thing.
That.
Then I have DLee's Shapely Imagination, her Color Hunt, her Nighttime Scare, and her Outdoor Countdown. And this is her cat, Mr. Mustache. And it was actually like my sister's cat that she ended up getting years later. So like it's little pieces of all parts of my life that I incorporate in the stories. And all of the characters within the story are actual people in my life that I take pictures of from their childhood and I have them created into characters in the book.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Every piece of DLee's world relates to me. So with that said, I will read you DLee's first day of school.
Guys, listen
Do you want to read the whole
see
story or just a part? Just a part where I could do the voices?
You gotta see her reading these books, guys. I have tried to convince her to start a story time on Instagram.
Doing that, yeah.
And I will continue to harass her until I see it happen. So go ahead, take it away.
Please do. Okay, so I'm gonna put on my DLee glasses so I can get into character, okay?
Okay.
All right. I have a story, what could it be? I have a story, come listen and see. I have a story, what could it be? Gather around to read with me. All right. So I'm not gonna read everything, so I'm just gonna read like a page and a half or something. So we're gonna start here. This is her first day of school and she finally finds someone that she knows, so. As she looks around, DLee was in for a treat. She saw her buddy Rye sitting in a yellow seat. Rye, she said, I did not know you were here. Yes, DLee, so no need to fear. My mommy just dropped me off here too. I like it so far in school. There's just so much to do. Come with me and I'll show you. So that's just a little.
What? Oh my God, but I loved it. That was great.
Just the voices. I can keep reading.
That was great. Now, let me tell you guys, drop a comment down below if you agree with me that she needs to have her own story time at least once a week on some kind of social platform. That was amazing. I love it. So tell me, what's next for DLee's World?
So I am working on a few more books. I want the series to grow so children can learn and grow through DLee. But I'm also working on an animated script, like a series. I want to create like a bilingual animated series for DLee's World.
Love that.
So essentially, that's my bigger goal.
Okay. And where can our listeners and viewers find you? And guys, especially if you are Hispanic, you are still shopping for Christmas. You probably haven't even started shopping for Christmas.
If you're like me, last minute, total last minute.
Okay, so make sure that you go and check out DLee's World. Where are DLee's World?
You could check me out on my website, www.dleesworld.com. I'm on Instagram at DLee's World and on Facebook at DLee's World. I also have a YouTube that you can find me on with my name, Diana Lee Santamaria.
Okay, I love it. Thank you so much, girl.
Thank you for having me.
I love it. Yes. All right. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Polymath Latina podcast. Make sure to stay connected with us directly through the polymathlatina.com and join the conversation over on Instagram. Don't forget to like and subscribe, then go listen to the full episode on your favorite podcast player. Remember to share your smile. Y hasta la próxima.